Alright, this is our next lesson in significant figures. This is now adding in the calculation portion. This is still the first section of, or the second section of chapter 1. Alright, calculations with significant figures. So we're going to take those rules that we learned in the last section and add to them. So calculations must be rounded to proper significant figures. Now the key with things that have calculations is that they have to be rounded at the end of the problem, meaning that we wait until the calculation is completely over in order to round our problems. Now, some of you have fancy calculators, like graphing calculators and things like that, or even some of your iPads and things like that that have significant figure calculators. Just be very, very careful if you're planning on trying to do some of those things, that you have to plug them in exactly right in order for it to work out correct. Just the general rules right now. First of all, with multiplication and division, you're going to be using the smallest number of significant figures. With addition and subtraction, you're going to be looking at the smallest number of decimal places. This is probably a good part in your notes, like if you have a highlighter, that you might want to go back and just kind of like highlight and kind of as a reference, because this is kind of the key, like what do you do for what type of math problem. Okay, so let's start with multiplication and division of significant figures. Okay, the result of this problem, so you're going to do the math, and the result has the same number as the smallest number of significant figures. So, meaning that you count the number of significant figures in each measurement, and you're going to round the result so that it has the smallest number. Okay, so that may not make sense right now, but if we look at the actual example problems, I think it's going to make maybe a little bit more sense. So let's see if we can kind of talk through an example, and hopefully that'll make a lot more sense. So here we go. Let's kind of look at an example where we take it step by step. So they're going to give you a typical math problem. Something, here we're going to go through something like this. So we have 3.55 times 2.461. Your first step is to always just do the math, meaning plug it in your calculator. So you get 8.73655. That's your calculator number. Okay? Now, once you're done with the calculator number, this is not sufficient. We need to round it so we have proper significant figures. What you're going to do is you're going to go back up to this original problem right here, and you're going to look at each part of the problem. The first part, 3.55, has 3 sig figs. 2.461 has 4 sig figs. And then you ask yourself, of those two numbers, which one of those is the least? Well, 3.55 has 3, so 3 and 4, 3 is the least, so that is the least number. So for step 3, your answer then can only have 3 sig figs, because with multiplication and division you go by the least. So that means now you take that calculator answer that we had up here and you round it so you only have 3, meaning that I say, okay, 8.73655. I go 1, 2, 3, and that's what I put in green here. And then what you'll do is you'll look next door, and it's a 6, and you use your rounding rules. So remember, your rounding rules is if it's 1 through 4, keep the same. And then therefore, if it's 5 through 9, you round up. Those are your rules. Okay, so this one, since it's 6, I tells you to round up, and so that's why we get, and for some reason that slide kind of messed up, so I'll rewrite the answer, 8.74 as the correct answer. Okay, alright, so let's look at a couple more. Alright, so this one, we're going to do full out on our own here. So 100 divided by 5.25. So we take 100 divided by 5.25, and you have to do the calculator part first. So calculator spits out 19.04761905. That's your calculator answer. Now, excuse me. Alright, so you're like, okay, go back to the original problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, because all those count, so 4. 1, 2, 3, that has 3. Again, 3 is the least, so your answer can only have 3. 1, 2, 3, look next door, it's a 4, so that means it's going to stay the same. 19.0 is your answer. Okay. Alright. Let's try another one. 500 divided by 2. Okay, so mathematically, hopefully that's pretty easy. 250. Okay, so you go over here, and 500. Now be careful, remember, there's no decimal. Remember our little saying, no decimal, no count. So that's a 1. This one, though, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That one's 5. So of course, though, that the smallest one is this one, so you can only have 1. So that means I can keep this 2 here. Look next door, it's a 5. So that's a 3. Now, you have to be very, very careful. Make sure you keep the integrity of the number. And what that means is, make sure you keep the value of the number. There's a big difference between 3 and 250. Okay, and if you don't believe me, here's what I always say. I will give you $3, you give me $250. So, I need to make sure that I put the placeholder zeros. As long as I don't put a decimal here at the end, right here after the 300, this is one significant figure. If I put a decimal there, then of course that becomes 3 significant figures. So just make sure that you keep the integrity of your number. So if you just put 3, that would be wrong. Now, moving on, addition and subtraction. They have their own set of rules. So, this is limited by the number of the smallest number of significant decimal places. So this is all determined by the number of decimal places. Okay, so you have to find the last significant figure in each measurement, and you have to figure out the one that is leftmost. And you have to round it to that decimal spot. So again, this is something, if you probably look at the examples, is going to make a lot more sense than just by looking at, the word information. So let's look at an example. 1.25 plus 3.6. Again, step 1 is always just do the math. You're going to do all the calculations before you start. So this one, my calculator spits out 4.85. Okay. Step 2. Again, we go back to the original problem. But this time, instead of just counting all the significant figures, you have to focus on the number of decimal places that it has. Meaning that, look at 1.25. 1.25 has 2 places after the decimal spot, meaning that it goes to the hundredth spot. Look at 3.6. It has 1 place after the decimal. Okay. Which one has the least number of decimal places? Well, the one that has the least number of decimal places is 0.6, right? So that's the number of decimal spots that you can have. I can only have 1 place after the decimal. So my answer now has to be rounded, so I only have 1 place after the decimal. So 4.85 here, that means I can only round to the 8 because I can only have one place after the decimal. So I look and the next number is a 5, so that means that the 8 must be rounded to a 9, so the answer is 4.9. So an addition and subtraction is all about the number of significant decimal places. Let's try another one. 1.25 plus 3.6. So again, 1.25 plus 3.6. We're going to add those two numbers together. Calculator answer is 4.85. Okay, so I add those two numbers together. Again, look, two places, one spot. So that means I can only have one spot after the decimal because that's the least. So one spot, look next door, round up, 4.9. Okay, again, 3.36 plus 2.257. Do the math. Add those two numbers together, get your calculator answer. 5.617. Okay, so again, look, two places, three places. The least is 2, so 1, 2, look next door. 5.62 is the correct answer for this one. Let's do one more, a little trickier one. Mathematically really easy, right? 238. Now I just wanted to show you this because notice this doesn't have any decimal places, and in fact this one's kind of really easy. I probably should have chose a harder one. But look here. No places after the decimal, no places after the decimal, so guess what? No places after the decimal. This is your answer. Okay? It's pretty straightforward. Now, what happens if you have problems that have both addition and subtraction and multiplication and division? You have to deal with each one separately. So like I have an example here, 1.33 times 2.8 plus 8.41. So of course you're going to follow your typical order of operations. So with this you're going to start with your parentheses, so I would deal with the 1.33 times the 2.8 first, and I would get my calculator answer, and then I would do sig figs for that. So notice it's a multiplication problem. I have 2 here, 3 here, so my answer would be in 2, so that means I would round it to 3.7. Once I do that, I put it down here in my problem. Then I would add on the 8.41. Then it's an addition problem. One place after the decimal, two places after the decimal. So that means that once I got that 12.11, when I added them together, I could only have one place after the decimal. So that would be my final answer. Keep in mind with sig figs that these are all based out on our uncertainty of our measuring devices. That's how they came up with these rules. That's how, where we're taking this from. So now you're ready to do some more practicing on your own.